Welcome to Chapter 11 of The Case of the Clock Tower Key, a 12-part Sherlock Holmes mystery. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story unfold. If you missed the previous chapter, please visit to my channel and enjoy the journey of Sherlock Holmes. The descent from the dark, silent heart of the tower into the cool, foggy air of the London night was like an ascent from the depths of some forgotten subterranean hell into the world of the living. We emerged from the great oak door, blinking in the hazy glow of the gaslights, to be met by the anxious and relieved face of Inspector Lestrade. Behind him, a dozen uniformed constables stood at the ready, their truncheons drawn, prepared for the confrontation that, thanks to Holmes's quick thinking and decisive action, had already been concluded. The signal, the single loud whistle, had never been given. Our appearance, with the now docile and utterly broken Alistair Vance between us, was a sight that rendered the usually loquacious Lestrade momentarily speechless. He stared at the keeper, a man who had been the spectral, terrifying watcher of his imagination, and saw him for what he now was, a small, pathetic figure, his eyes vacant, his body trembling with the aftershocks of his spent mania. "Good heavens, Holmes," Lestrade stammered at last, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and grudging admiration. "You have him! How did you manage it?" Holmes, ever the master of the understated, simply shrugged. "The watcher, Inspector, was merely a man in need of a rest," he said, his voice weary but calm. "A long and profound rest, I should think, far from the sound of ticking clocks." He then provided Lestrade with a concise and carefully edited account of the night's events. He stripped away the more bizarre and psychological elements of the case, the cryptic rhyme, the architect's hidden puzzles, the keeper's tragic descent into madness. Instead, he presented it as a simple, logical sequence of events that Lestrade's practical, unimaginative mind could readily grasp. Vance, he explained, was an eccentric and unstable man who, in a fit of pique, had deliberately damaged the clock's mechanism. He had then hidden himself away within the tower, using his intimate knowledge of its secret passages and a few simple chemical tricks to frighten away anyone who came looking for him. Our role, Holmes stated, had simply been to locate his hiding place and persuade him to surrender. It was a version of the truth, if not the whole truth, and it was one that satisfied Lestrade's need for a neat and tidy conclusion to the case. As Holmes was giving his report, a carriage pulled up, and a young woman, her face pale and anxious in the flickering gaslight, stepped out. It was Eleanor Vance. Lestrade, in a moment of foresight that was unusual for him, had summoned her, believing that her presence might be required. The reunion between the father and daughter was a scene of profound and heartbreaking pathos. Eleanor rushed to her father's side, her face a mask of love and concern. She seemed not to see the ragged, wild-eyed madman he had become, but only the father she had loved and lost. "Father," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "It's over now. You can come home." Alistair Vance looked at her, and for a moment, a flicker of recognition, of lucidity, seemed to pass through his haunted eyes. He reached out a trembling hand and touched her cheek. "The voice," he murmured, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's gone. It's so quiet." He then seemed to collapse in on himself, the last of his strength deserting him. He was led, gently and without resistance, to the waiting carriage. As he was helped inside, he looked back at the great silent tower, his silent companion and tormentor, with a look of utter desolate emptiness. He was a man who had lost his purpose, his sacred mission, and in doing so, had lost the very core of his being. I found myself reflecting on what would become of him. A quiet asylum in the countryside, most likely, a place of green lawns and peaceful gardens, where the only sound would be the gentle chirping of birds. It was a fate that seemed both merciful and deeply tragic. He would be safe, he would be cared for, but the man he had once been, the master horologist, the faithful keeper, was gone forever, lost in the silent, echoing chambers of the tower and his own mind. Lestrade, for once, seemed to be lost in his own thoughts. The case had clearly shaken him, had challenged his comfortable black and white view of the world. He turned to Holmes, and in his eyes I saw a look of genuine, unqualified respect, a look I had seldom seen him give my friend. "Holmes," he said, his voice low and sincere, I must admit, I thought you were chasing shadows. I could never have solved this. Not in a million years. The Yard is in your debt." Holmes, who had little taste for praise or sentiment, simply nodded. "The shadows, Inspector," he said, "are often more substantial than they appear. You would do well to remember that." With a final nod to the inspector, we took our leave. We left the scene of our strange and terrifying adventure, the silent tower, the baffled constables, the lingering sense of madness and despair, and made our way back towards the familiar, comforting normality of Baker Street. As we walked, the first pale light of dawn was beginning to break over the city. The fog was beginning to lift, and the dark, brooding presence of the clock tower, now just a silhouette against the lightening sky, seemed to lose some of its menace. It was no longer a place of active, malevolent intent, but simply a structure of stone and steel, a silent monument to the strange and tragic events that had unfolded within its walls. The silence it projected was no longer an oppressive, unnatural void, but a peaceful, restful quiet. The keeper's mad quest was over. The tower and the man it had broken were finally at peace. And as the city began to stir around us, I felt a sense of profound relief. The relief of a man who has journeyed into the heart of darkness and has, against all odds, found his way back into the light. Thank you for listening to Chapter 11 of The Case of the Clock Tower Key. If you enjoyed the mystery and want more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with fellow mystery lovers. Your support helps keep the stories alive. See you in the next chapter.